We are recording.
Give it another minute.
It is 1 p.m. Central, and I call this meeting of the State Board of Education Strategic Planning Committee to order. Ms. Reed, could you please call the roll to determine a quorum?
Yes. Ms. McInturf.
Here.
Mr. Holt.
Here.
Mr. Jensen.
Here.
Mr. Chairman, you have 3 members present.
Thank you. So we have a quorum. As this committee is meeting virtually, we have prepared a statement of necessity to be read into the record. Mr. Shanahan, could you please read that statement?
Good morning, or excuse me, good afternoon. Thank you, Mr. Chair. The Tennessee State Board of Education Strategic Planning Committee called an electronic meeting at 1 p.m. Central Time today, Friday, January 9th, 2026. This meeting is called to review and discuss the draft of the State Board's master plan. Due to the time-sensitive nature of the items on the committee's agenda, and due to the fact that the committee members reside across the state, it was determined that a physical quorum of the members could not be assembled in Nashville for purposes of this meeting, and as such, this meeting should be conducted electronically. Notice of the meeting was posted on the State Board's website along with the agenda and instructions for accessing the meeting.
Thank you, Mr. Shanahan. Our board meetings policy, as well as TCA 8-44-108, require all votes during electronic meetings of the board to be taken by call of the roll. As this is a virtual meeting that's being recorded, I move that the recording serve as the minutes for this meeting. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you. Ms. McInturf seconds. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Or I guess, Ms. Reed, you will need to call the roll on this before we can move into letting the minutes serve as the votes.
Yes, thank you. Ms. McInturf.
Aye.
Mr. Jensen.
Aye.
Mr. Holt.
Aye.
Mr. Chairman, you have 3 ayes.
Thank you. The motion passes. So this is the third and final meeting of the Strategic Planning Committee. The purpose of our meeting today is to discuss the master plan draft that the State Board staff has prepared and provide any feedback. And since we're meeting virtually, I'd ask that members and staff identify themselves before addressing the group. So I will now turn it over to Ms. Reed to facilitate our discussion. Ms. Reed.
Great, thank you. All right, so we are nearing the finish line for our new master plan. It will last us through 2028 once approved. And you all received a draft version of this back in early December to review and come prepared for our discussion today. So we will be walking through each of the 4 strategic focus areas and discussing both the actions generally and specifically the goals that are proposed for the next 3 years within our master plan. Before we jump in, I do want to remind us of these key questions we've seen since last May, in which we first started discussing updating the master plan and thinking about what do we put into the master plan and where do we want to focus. And so in thinking about these 3 key questions, we also are considering, where do we have the most influence as the rule and policy making body for the state and public education. And then where also do we have indirect influence? As we know, we are not the only stakeholders involved in this work. We aren't even, we're significantly removed from the classroom itself where the real work is happening on the ground. And so we think about what do we have influence over, what is within our locus of control, but based on the rules and policies that we have established, what do we hope to see in the next 3 years and where are we really focusing our collective efforts? So we'll start with the first strategic focus area. And this in the current master plan is literacy, and based on all of our stakeholder feedback that we've gathered, conversations we've been having, this is expanding to include numeracy. So this focus area would be literacy and numeracy. In bold at the top, you see the overall statement that we're making about where we want to be on the whole, our kind of big picture goal. And then underneath it are the actions of the board as well as the specific goals that we'll work towards in the next 3 years. So based on the feedback that we've been discussing throughout our meetings over the last few months, we determined that for the goals themselves, we would apply an average amount of increase that we've been seeing in the last few years to the current data point for literacy and numeracy, and then build that out for the next 3 years to arrive at our 2028 goal. I should have said first that I want to start with discussing the goals and get some feedback on those, and then we'll talk if there's any specific notes that y'all want to share about the actions themselves too. So based on the 2 goals that we have before you, the first one is for 3rd grade students, and this is specifically focusing in on ELA. And we know that this is a really critical data point. I think Dr. Morrison referred to it as thinking about it as a dipstick in terms of where we are as a state in ELA. This is the first moment in which students are actually taking a statewide assessment. It's the first statewide data point that we have of how students are doing in English language arts. And so that is how we arrived at that first goal. And the second one is specific to mathematics. Similar approach here. 7th grade is the last year before students really start to diverge in different pathways for mathematics, have a lot more options before them. And so we're focusing in on 7th grade as a key point of interest. But all that to say that we will continue to still look at all of the state assessment data points, not limited to these, but we are setting goals here as these are really important points for us to be annually discussing. And use a similar methodology here of looking at what type of increase we've made over the last 3 years, averaging that and applying that to the current data point to set a goal for 2028. So I want to pause here to open it up to you all for a discussion on the goals themselves, reactions, thoughts here.
Did you use the double AMO from the 41% for 2025 to get to the 47.7? Is that what we did? We may have probably talked about this.
So in the current master plan, we were using AMO calculations to set goals, and we moved away from that for this next 3 years. So what we've used is looking across the last 3 years of data points. What was the average increase we were seeing? Taking that average increase and then applying that over the next 3 years. So if we make that average increase in 26, 27, and 28, we'll be at this point, which is at 47.7.
Okay. And same thing, I guess, for 7th grade.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Mr. Eby, I see your hand is raised.
Yeah, I don't want to speak before any other committee members speak. So, but I do have a question. I guess basically my concern is that you've taken the average over the last 3 years. Are we satisfied with the average? I mean, we want to move this thing forward. And in fact, I think looking at the data in the last year, we actually, or the last couple of years, we beat the average. And so why wouldn't we set a goal that was higher? I know we want to be able to say that we met the goal, but before we've been adding, 5, 6, 7% a year, which really wasn't realistic. But why? My question would be, why would we just be satisfied with just the average as our goal?
We can't really say 5 or 6% isn't realistic because that's what we are expecting students to get in schools for double AMO to get a 5. So I mean that's basically 3. I mean it's more complicated, but 3% would be a level 4 and 6% would be a level 5. So this is about 6% higher, correct, than we had last year. 40 about.
No, this is 6% over 3 years. But that's the average of what we made each year over the 3 years. So if we just do the average, this is my point. If we just do the average of 2.3% or whatever the number is each year for 6 years, yeah, you get 6% over those 3 years. but why should we be satisfied? If we really want to do the best we can for our students and excel and get Tennessee leading in the country, why should we be satisfied of setting a goal of just doing what we've done the last 3 years? That's my question.
And I actually had the exact same thought as Chairman Eby looking through these goals. And I also wonder if it felt like the way that we calculated adequate growth for the summer camps for progression from 3rd to 4th grade, which is sort of this, can we find a defensible way to break down to something realistic that students can achieve? But if it's our goal that we should shoot for higher than that, I also feel like optically having more than half, and I get being realistic versus saying it should be 100%. But crossing over from less than half to more than half to something in the 50% plus, I just think would optically look better than a very precise number that's less than half.
I think that's a good point, Ryan. I think optics is a lot from the standpoint of what's the message we're trying to give Tennessee people, our students, our parents, the legislators. Are we satisfied with average, or should we show some substantial? Now, I understand the importance of, you don't want to set an unrealistic goal and then, at the end of the day, look like you missed your goal. But if you're making progress, it's how we report it. So.
This is Larry Jensen. I've had folks mention to me the Mississippi Miracle, and I don't know if you're familiar with that, but they have had radical progress. And I do think people are aware of that, and I think we do need to be reasonably aggressive, I think would be the way I would say it. And I don't know what that is, but I tend to agree with what others are saying.
Could we look at, do we know roughly where we fall nationally as a state? I know that this is our own assessment, not other states have their own assessments and they can have different levels of rigor. But in those sorts of comparative tools that exists, for some reason, I feel like I recall us being around 25th.
Yeah, middle of the pack.
Yeah.
I just gave a talk at the Clinton Rotary, and I've got the NAEP results for math and science, and we're in the top 25. Let me see, I pull it up right here. So NAEP for 4th grade reading, we're 23rd. For 8th grade reading, we're 20th. For 4th grade math, we're 13th. And for 8th grade math, we're 19th.
And that's great. I wonder if we could look at what some other states in the top 10, and maybe this isn't workable if just each state's assessments have a different level of rigor, but my guess is the states in the top 10 have rigorous assessments and they're setting ambitious goals. And it'd be interesting to see if other states have goals like this that could be instructive.
If we use the like just the regular AMO year over year, so say we make it the AMO for next year and then the next year, the third year would be 51.25. So we could go above the 50%, what you all are wanting to do, and then also kind of keep it, I don't know, just like have fidelity with what we're expecting schools to do. And that would kind of have a rhyme and a reason for changing it from 47.7 to 51. I don't know. But Allie, you said you had kind of gone away from the AMO. So
I like that math, but I think we're trying to move away from using the terminology of AMOs, right? Isn't that right?
That's correct.
And can you tell me why?
It doesn't mean that we can't consider that calculation, but I do not have more information on that. I don't know if anyone else on our team can explain.
It's a moving target. This is Sarah Morrison. It's a moving target, Chrissy, in terms of, AMOs is sort of tied to our federal accountability plan. There's talk of waivers and, things shifting there. And, so the AMOs, those are not reflected in our letter grades currently. So, you've got your state accountability system that's not built on AMOs, and there's sort of a legacy measure currently in terms of tied to our federal provisions that may or may not be changing. Again, too early to know. But
Mhm.
the only other thing I was going to add in, I mean, I think this is a really fruitful conversation to have, because I think trying to figure out how we measure, achievable, ambitious goals is important, and also just kind of tricky, because we're trying to foretell the future in a way that feels ambitious, but also achievable. I mean, we've talked also about the way SCORE has thought about it, which is sort of the one student in every classroom becoming one more student becoming proficient each year. So I think, Mr. Hughes, your suggestion to look around and see like other states, other organizations, we could consider some other methodologies. Allie, I know you've done some of that already though. So do you want to speak to that in terms of what you've looked at or what you might continue to look at as we shape this for final?
Yeah, I think going back to Ms. McIntyre's point, the AMO target, even if we're not referring to it as that, if we move away from that same calculation, we can certainly apply, is what I was trying to express a moment ago. But that is what also we have applied the last 3 years, and we have not been meeting any of those goals. The feedback that we received from stakeholders, including members, was that it was not, it was too ambitious to have those types of goals. So I just want to remind us of where we've been, and certainly we can still continue that conversation and bring it before the board to also weigh if we would like to do so. But that is how we calculated the last 3 years set of goals. And while we saw improvement, we did receive a lot of feedback that we wanted to adjust, which is why we have a different method of calculating these goals and looking at, okay, what is the average amount of increase we've been making? Mr. Eby, when you and I spoke earlier this week, I think even just tossing around, you throw out maybe we add on 25% to that, as kind of using that as a starting point and then bumping it up a little bit. So we'd love to hear any other thoughts if other members have ideas of how we might want to consider. Happy to keep looking at other states, but of course we do need to consider what's in our locus of control here as a state in Tennessee. What are our rules and policies? Where are they leading us? We have this overarching goal for all students, but we're thinking about in the next year, where can we reasonably expect to push ourselves to, and then the following year and so forth. But would love to hear if there's other ideas on the table of how we might calculate this, or if there is interest in continuing to use that AMO calculation to set these.
That's just a
Larry
quick
Jensen,
that was just
go
a
ahead.
sorry, that was just a quick calculate, and that's probably wrong, but that's just I'm just trying to add 3% each year. But anyway, go ahead, Larry.
Well, I was going to ask a maybe too high a level question, but I'll ask it anyway. What are we charged with being aspirational on this, or are we charged with, in terms of a strategic plan? I'm just curious what the sense is about what we are trying to get to. I mean, we've used the words reasonable, average. I mean, is it aspirational, or is it just let's get a reasonable goal? And as you just said, that given the circumstances that we're working toward that. I'm asking for a comment, not necessarily a conclusion.
Prior to, what was it, 2022, when we implemented the current master plan, we always had these broad statements that you see at the top of the slide. It was an all student statement, and we had several of them, and they weren't really specific to different focus areas for us as a state necessarily, or specific to what we have influence over. And so in revising the master plan in 2022, we kept those same big, bold statements about all students, but then said, what do we want to see annually? And making those to be more of the SMART goals. So specific, measurable, I'm forgetting what all the letters mean, but achievable, and time bound, and then what's the R?
Realistic.
Realistic, thank you. So thinking about it in that context of developing annual SMART goals that we should be building towards to get us to that all students statement. So that's really kind of the genesis of having an overall statement and then these annual goals.
Okay. I have a follow-up, more specific question. what is our reasoning for using the third grade? I note that Mississippi has taken grade 4 for all of their measures. And they were in 2013, and I think this is an issue that we ought to think about. In 2013, they were 49, 50th, 50th, 50th in grade 4 reading, grade 4 math, grade 8 reading, and grade 8 math. And then in 24, they moved from, 50th in number 9 in grade 4 reading. And their 2025 numbers, I think, are either coming out or will. And they're now 16th in the country, which is amazing to me. And but my question: why are they using 4th grade? We use 3rd. Is there something that we're holding on to that, or why would they use the 4th grade?
I've looked at their plan, but I am not sure off the top of my head.
Fourth grade is NAEP, the NAEP test, right? And third grade
Right.
is when TCAP starts. I think I may be wrong. Sarah probably knows, but if I recall correctly, that was sort of the difference, is that we start TCAPs in third grade and the NAEP test started in 4th grade. And so we got
Be focusing on the NAEP assessment as their key point.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, it
You
just
know-
seems to me we need to be realistic but aspirational. Now, you tell me how we do that, and but I think we do need to be somewhat aspirational but realistic, and they need a conflict of terms. But that's my thought.
I agree with that. Let me make just one point here, is that where are we right now? We're at 41% or something like that. And,
Yes.
and the goal
In
is
third grade,
28%.
41.7. Mhm.
And if our goal is that all students are proficient, and if we went 2.3% a year, we're 25 or 30 years off from being able to have all students proficient. And is that the message that we want to give? And I agree, we got to be realistic, but I think we can't be satisfied with just what we're doing right now. And I would argue that we had a good year last year, and you're taking the average of the last 3 years. So you're already dumbing it down a little bit. So that's my thought.
Do you think that every year, as we're working on, or you approve the master plan report that summarizes where we are in progress towards our goals, is an opportunity to make updates to it? And so these are goals for the next 3 years. But certainly if we are far exceeding them within those 3 years, we can absolutely adjust them, because we do still always want it to be a bit of a stretch and not something that we're easily ticking off. So I do think that that's an important note here, is that whatever we're setting is just for 3 years, with the caveat that we can also still make updates to it if we feel like it is not aggressive enough.
If we set the goal at 50%, I mean, that is realistic, I think, because that's, if we have the level of growth that we have had recently, that can get us from 41% to 50% over the next 3 years. I think that is ambitious. I mean, I think in reality, crossing over, I don't know if we have ever had 50% under this sort of testing regime. I think that it would optically be, it's an easy number to understand. It's not in a sense, it's a low bar, right? I mean, whenever people hear that less than half of students are proficient, it's always, well, how can that be a success? But once you cross over from less to half or more than half, then, it's a big round number that if we, as a state, were able to hit that metric, well, first it means that we're seeing massive, meaningful year-over-year growth over a 3-year period. And would be the sort of thing that hopefully, if we start moving in that direction, could rally some momentum behind. It may not be high enough, but I think that 50% at a minimum is a realistic, ambitious goal that could be pointing us more in the right direction.
I mean, if
Ms.
we're
would
gonna
you
do
recommend
that, I
that
say
for
we just
both
go with the
math and ELA? Sorry.
I was just gonna say, if we're gonna do that, might as well go to 51.25. I mean, or whatever it would be, because I didn't add the point. I mean, just so we can, I mean, it makes sense. We're not just throwing out a number at 50. We're actually using some sort of calculation that we're already expecting districts to use.
I like that.
Just to make sure I'm tracking what we're saying, we want to reapply the AMO methodology for calculating third grade ELA and seventh grade math. So I'll just double check that, Ms. McInturf, but that's what we were proposing as setting the goal amount for 2028. Is that correct?
I think so. I think that would, I think that goes in with our smart, and sorry, it's not realistic, it's relevant. So this would be, this would make it relevant to what districts are already trying to do. It's definitely achievable, I think, like Ryan was saying. And it's relevant to what we're already doing, and people are already using those calculations. I mean, I know that I think that there was some feedback, so we need to make sure we're remembering that they said that the goal was too high. But if we communicate this is the calculation we use based on their expectations for statewide districts, I think that would work.
And to Larry's point, I mean, the goal being too high, I think it's one thing if the goal is 80% or 100%, and you look at history but you know, to have a goal in the 50 to 60% here, and we're supposed to be aspirational and set a high bar. I mean, I feel like that's, we're doing what we're supposed to be doing in our position if we're setting that sort of goal.
Mm-hmm.
Can I ask a more fundamental question? So going back to Larry's comment about Mississippi, who I think uses the NAEP test, and if we use the NAEP test, then I think we're a couple of percentage points higher already, but that gives us a number for the national average. Whereas the TCAP doesn't give us the national average, but the TCAP is specific for Tennessee students. So is there a way that you might want to think about that we'll score this much on the TCAP or this much on the NAEP or something like that? Give yourself a little broader runway, or be able to compare nationally. I'm just throwing that out. I don't know the answer to that.
The only thing is not every student takes NAEP, so it'd be just that small group. That would be, I mean, that would be the only thing. I would love that, but I think it would, for this, maybe.
That's a good point. That's a really good point. Suggestion withdrawn.
So I wonder what theirs is, like for the state, what their proficiency is. Larry, do you know? Or were you just talking about NAEP?
No, I'm sure we could get it, but
Yeah.
I think that's on people's minds. That's my point, is that it's out there, it's public, it's frankly phenomenal that they've been able to do that. Now that starts in 2013. This didn't happen over the last 2 years, but they've done a remarkable job. And I just think there's probably a presence of mind around that in the public that, well, what's Mississippi done? So.
Yeah, it used to be we were happy with Mississippi and Alabama because they were 49th and 50th and kept Tennessee from being off the bottom. But of course, we're not on the bottom now. But they have done phenomenal.
It's extremely dangerous to Google things and certainly look at AI for data in real time. But there are a lot of Mississippi newspapers, at least that I'm seeing in my search results, that say that in 2025 that their ELA proficiency levels were 77%.
Whoa.
So,
Wow.
you know, just for something to think about as we're looking at what our numbers should be.
I think this has been a really great conversation here about our goals. Let's move us into talking about the actions for literacy and numeracy. You have the draft before you that has the full statements. This is just a summary of highlights for the actions, but I wanted to just leave space in case any of you had points of specific feedback that you wanted to address within the actions of the board for literacy and numeracy.
I'll just say that the action to convene with the Tennessee Higher Education Commission, I really like that. I think the more we do integrating K through 12 with higher ed and the workforce, I think the stronger we're going to be. So excellent for that.
That's
I'm
a
on the-
perfect segue
I'm on the
into
wrong
our,
one. Did I skip down? Sorry about that.
you're leading us right into the next one. That's great.
Yeah.
Let me know if I need to go back, but I can move us into our second focus area. So this was a little bit more narrow, I should just say different words. It wasn't narrow. It's post-secondary and career previously or in the current master plan. And the proposed language change in terms of the strategic focus area name would be college, career, and military readiness. This aligns to work that the department is doing. This aligns to feedback we received and discussed with the Tennessee Higher Education Commission. So different education partners are all in alignment and agreement with these adjustments that we're proposing to you all. But within this focus area, we have, of course, that overarching goal that all students are prepared for success, whether it's college, career, and or military. And then the actions of the board and our goals. I did just receive the college and career readiness average for our state over the last 3 years and add that in just 20 minutes before we hopped on this call. So that first goal is hot off the press, if you will. But using the same idea, we saw approximately 4.5% increase annually in the last 3 years in terms of our statewide college and career readiness data points. So that's this percentage of students who are earning college and career readiness status upon graduation. And so again, about 4.5 percentage point increase annually over the last 3 years. So bumps that up to 5, which then if you apply that into the next 3 years, puts us at that 80.9% by 2028. So that's the first goal. Let me just pause here and we can talk about that one first.
I've got a comment if there's no others. So I got a email this week challenging how can we be college and career ready at 80% or whatever the number is when our ACT scores are like, 30% or 40%. So somewhere I think we need to be sure that, and I explained to them, college and career ready, you don't have to go to college. I mean, you got EPSO requirements, you got credentials. So do we somehow define what we mean by college and career ready? Or I know we do elsewhere, but is that something that we ought to, show more of a definition of what we mean by college and career ready?
Bob, I
There
had
is
a similar, go ahead.
Go ahead, Mr. Jensen.
Well, I had a similar concern about that language when we put college, and I know THEC wants us to do that, but it seems to me we need to make a shift not only on this document but in how we talk about post-secondary. That, I mean, you ready at college. We're struggling to get people to understand that they're something other than going to a 4-year college. So I don't know if that addresses, Bob, what you're thinking, but it just seems
absolutely,
like
Larry.
when we start with college and career, well, what is that? That is a good, nice thing, but I think it's incomplete, frankly, in today's environment.
Maybe we have definition of college, career, and military path, broaden that definition or something.
Who controls that definition? Is that something defined in law or policies, or where does that come from? We just assert it.
I don't know the exact source, but I'm using we're using language that's aligned with the Department of Education in terms of how we're defining college. And that is included in the draft document that will be what is published on the state board's website. It has a footnote that defines college as including all higher education options in state and out of state, public and private, 2-year and 4-year, and Tennessee colleges of applied technology. It also then has an additional footnote below it that defines the college and career readiness indicator of all the components that make that up, to your point, Mr. Eby. So it is in the document. I do think, though, to everyone's point here, that we need to do is continue to talk about it like that. So as we're saying college, we're speaking aloud by saying college, what we mean by college is, and inserting that in conversations, because we can write it a whole bunch of different ways in this one document, but is that actually getting the message across of what we mean by it? It's difficult to do in one singular document. So I think as we continue to talk about it publicly, and when we're reviewing the master plan with the full board, when we're discussing the master plan report, when we're talking about presentations, workshop presentations, as we're discussing data that we're reviewing related to these goals, we should be talking about it collectively and using that definition in all of those explanations. When we're doing presentations and engagement opportunities, same thing. So, open to other suggestions here, but I do just want to encourage us to keep talking about it that way. I think that's the best way to really get that point across.
Well, can you take that first sentence, Tennessee School will prepare all students for success in college, career, and military pathways as defined in such and such document or something like that? At least that will lead them to that, so that there's no misconception of, that college means a 4-year college or something.
So looking at the document that Ms. Reed has circulated for the actual master plan, where it has college on our screen here for the slide deck,
Mm-hmm.
in the report that we published, there's a footnote like right above the comma for the college, and that then goes down to the definition.
Okay.
That Ms. Reed was referring to. To your point, Bob, about whether we actually have this is an adequate measure of readiness. I'm looking at that definition of college and career readiness, and it says earning a tier 3 or tier 2 industry credential. So does that mean that if a student earns a single industry credential, that checks the box off, and they then fall into the category of college or career ready?
Yes, and it's my understanding that earning a credential is not something that you're achieving just in completing one singular course, but there may be people who are more knowledgeable about this than I am.
This is Michael. I don't know that I would say I'm super knowledgeable about it, but I can say that depending on the industry certification, there are very specific requirements, but they typically require much more than just one course, and there are assessments associated with many of them as well.
Okay, great.
And it's something that you only achieve upon graduation, is earning that credential.
Great. Yeah, for some reason I thought maybe that would be one course. That's good.
Larry Jensen again. Let me push on that a little bit. I mean, if I pick this up, I'm looking at this and I don't have the background that Ms. Gaffey gave us about the definitions. I pick it up, I read it. My impression is that you put a high priority on college, and I think that definition of college to most people would not include a certificate pursued, a TCAT or whatever. And that's my question. If we're trying to help people understand there are other pathways, and we kind of start out with what I think would be in the public college is a 4-year college. Maybe some would extend it to junior college or community college, but I think if we're going to communicate something that is different, that is not, in my mind, I get lost in that first word. And I'm not saying that shouldn't be a goal. That's not what I'm saying here. But we got 50% of the children, or whatever the number is, 59.2% college ready, whatever. What about the other 40%? I don't know. As you guys know, this is something that I feel pretty strongly about. So I just want to challenge that, and understand it's defined here and defined there. But if this is a living document that people are going to read, they're not necessarily going to go to TCA annotated, whatever. So for what it's worth.
Yeah.
So Allie, the what we're looking at, the slide deck on the screen, is not the master plan proposed, right? This is a slide deck for internal discussion purposes for today. And
Just to ground our conversation, but no, it is not. I did not put the entire document in these slides. That's correct.
I understand that. But again, this is, I mean, would you say that for a lot of people, this is going to be the first thing and maybe the only thing they look at?
I guess my point, I think we're talking
Not
about
a statement, question.
the slide deck isn't what they're looking at. They're looking at the report, which it doesn't say as defined in TCA. It says right after the word college, it is inclusive of the following higher education options: in-state and out-of-state, public and private, 2-year and 4-year, and TCATs. So I just want to make sure we're all clear that, like, there's the slide deck that's what we're looking at today. Then there's the report that does actually spell all that out within this, on the same page as.
I think the concern is this slide deck going to be used to present to people, like in a board meeting, this is what our master plan is. And what I hear you say, Ryan, is that this slide deck is only for this discussion today. This isn't what would be presented at a board meeting. Is that right? Because I agree with Larry
That's
that if you just say the percentage of students enrolling in college following graduation will increase to 59.2%, that, if I'm the reader from outside looking at that, then I'm thinking of 4-year college. But I don't think that's the intent for this slide.
And I'll credit Nathan James. He shared with me the thought that could we simplify all this just by calling it post-secondary? If we call it post-secondary, then
yeah, so we had the word post-secondary, but in conversation with THEC and the Department of Education, we decided to move it to the word college because post-secondary is inclusive of college, career, and military. So we had post-secondary and career readiness previously, and the argument is that post-secondary is inclusive of career, is inclusive of college, is inclusive of military.
I think
So we're getting more specific by using these 3 words instead of saying post-secondary.
I think you just want to better define it and get to Larry's point, make it so it's clear what you're talking about. I think that's the only comment that's being made here.
Could you have post-secondary or college, college? I mean, I think I have an understanding perhaps maybe of why they want it to stay at college, but that doesn't look at the real, I don't think it looks at the realistic place where we are in our training and education in the state.
Well, you can say post-secondary, e.g. college, TCAT, community college, or something like that to better define it. I mean, I think that's
that would be fine with me.
Military application.
Sarah, jump in.
Substance.
Somebody else was ahead of me. Go ahead.
Well, no, I mean, I was trying to pivot us to the substance of the percentage and the goal.
Okay, that's good. I'll quickly just say, I think there is challenge. We're trying to align even our verbiage with our partners at THEC and TDOE. So it can be tricky. I hear what everyone's saying too, but trying to norm on the terminology, I still like the idea of the asterisk or the footnote, because at least the way I'm reading it, maybe we're looking at it differently. College, career, and military sort of lays out the 3 various post-high school options in whatever order or not. But I think we can continue to debate that, discuss it additionally, maybe even offline. So yeah, Mr. Hughes, if you want to move on to the metrics, that's all I wanted to say.
And I mean, we could also add for actions of the state board. I'm looking at the master plan for public education document itself that I think is the one that we're working off of. And it lists bullet points of actions. I mean, one of them could be, communication plans about what college is. And that when we talk about college, we're talking about all of these things. We're talking about THECs. We're talking about 2-year community colleges. So just a thought.
Suggestion, thanks.
On the percentage, my understanding, Ms. Reed, is that the calculation is similar to the process followed for ELA and math. So it's looking at what we have done and continuing it out forward. Is that right?
With a slight push, but yes, it is the same idea.
Okay. Well, I wonder if we apply the same concept we just talked about and maybe increase it a little bit for not saying that, not just implicitly saying what we have done the past 3 years is success. If we do that for 3 more years, then we made it. But doing that plus some amount.
Let's take a look at the second goal on the slide as well as in your document. It is italicized, and this is a question that I posed to you when I shared the draft. So the reason for the italicis and the note to discuss is that we have this goal that is in our current master plan. We're potentially proposing to carry it forward, of a goal that's focused on college enrollment. And there's some consideration from our education partners in thinking about removing this second goal and just focusing on the first one, because college readiness is what we are measuring as a state. Our rules and policies have a greater influence over readiness rather than enrollment, and college, singling out enrollment in college, is already built into the goal as in the first goal, which does address college as well as other post-secondary options for readiness. So feeling like there's a duplicativeness here. In discussing that point, or that point of consideration with the Tennessee Higher Education Commission, they liked naturally the inclusion of a college enrollment goal, though they also supported the idea of potentially developing a goal that's related to high school and beyond plans, or something that is really ensuring that we're talking to students about college. That was more of their push, and thought that we could achieve that a lot of ways. And so they were supportive of adding into our actions, especially if we were to remove that goal, of really thinking more about not just if students are ready, but are they learning about college as an option for post-secondary. And something that they also voiced was that they've been tracking a gap that they're seeing between the number of students who are considered ready for college but aren't enrolling. And so that is a piece of feedback that we've built into the actions that you have in the draft, in terms of something that we would discuss regularly with the 2 convening boards as well. So want to put it to the group to discuss whether or not we think we should keep that second goal specific to college enrollment.
So I was looking back at our 2025 master plan annual report, and it reminded me that our college enrollment numbers have declined significantly over the past decade. There was the large COVID time period drop, and we sort of plateaued at a lower number after that. I think we've all seen this chart. And personally, I think it is important that we continue to emphasize college enrollment in addition to college readiness. And especially with it being an area where we've demonstrated as a state that we can have higher numbers. We have all these resources that we're putting into preparing students for post-secondary in many ways, but college being one of them. I do think having that as a metric that we have amongst our goals is important.
Going back to Sarah's comment about collaboration with higher ed, and first refresh my memory on how college is defined here for this specific thing. And then secondly, does higher ed have any kind of a goal? And if they do, or if they don't, why shouldn't we be collaborating with them for some common goal or common language or something there for that, specifically this one, because that seems like they're really tied together.
The word college is measured exactly the same as we've been discussing, so inclusive of 2 and 4 year, public, private. And I don't believe that THEC has Well, they're currently updating their master plan as well, and I cannot recall.
So does not include TCAT, then it's just 2 and 4
No,
years.
it does. I didn't list them. I was just saying it's the same definition we've been talking about.
Okay.
So it's not any different, but I can't recall right now if they are including it in their master plan. But it is something that THEC is annually tracking. As you know, they come before our board in the summer, in August annually, to share the outcomes of that. They publish an annual report on it. So it is something they're actively tracking.
So why isn't this one that we would talk to them about and say, working together, should we set a goal? This is what, or it just seems to me this is perfect for integration between the two organizations, which I think we would like to see more and more of.
It sounds like we want to keep the college enrollment goal.
And do we know if THEC has a goal for that?
I don't recall if they have one in their strategic plan, but as I said, they annually are tracking it. It's an important measure for them as well. And we did talk with them about this too.
All right, I'm looking now. They're having a special called meeting a week from today, 16th. That's next Friday. And I know they have had a lot of discussion about what goals to set versus sort of what programmatic pillars to put forward. So while we're talking, I will continue to peruse unless someone else has the answer ready, but I'll let you know
Thank you.
if they have an actual goal on college enrollment.
While she's looking at that, any other comments, points of feedback related to the actions within this strategic focus area?
Can I throw a quick plug out there for the high school and beyond plans? This is something that is immediately directly in our wheelhouse, and we will share some data with you, but we have some research now that shows that the familiarity with high school and beyond plans varies quite a bit across the state. And so even though it's a policy requirement, in cities, only 35% of counselors are familiar with high school and beyond plans. And in rural parts of the state, about 60% are. So there seems to need to be some sort of attention drawn to that as a tool to be able to support everything we're talking about.
That's an excellent point, Michael. I saw that data too, and it's pretty mind-boggling when we have it as a rule, as a requirement, et cetera, and the counselors themselves aren't aware of high school and beyond plans. So I like the idea of highlighting that.
And that is included in the second action on the draft document.
Right.
Under college and career readiness. It does call out high school and beyond plan. So yes, thanks for putting that out, Michael.
It's interesting that the rural districts are more using it more so than the city districts.
That's been my experience. You go to Paris or Milan, or they are, seems to me, well ahead. And I think it's in somewhat driven by the local industry that, they've got to have job training. That's been my experience.
There's also been, and we had a presentation about this maybe a year or so ago. There are grant dollars that are supporting rural advisory counselors. And so I think there's just additional resources that we've seen applied across the state, especially in rural communities, which could also speak to the higher percentage there. Okay, I'm going to move us into teachers and leaders. This is our third strategic focus area. Again, you see our broad statement, overarching goal of what we're working towards. You have the actions in the full draft. This is a summary of what's included there, and then the goals, which we'll focus our time on today. So the first goal, let me just first start off by saying these goals have been difficult to work on. Because there's just a variety of different ways we can consider setting a goal, different data points, and then some real interest in potentially doing some more studying and research and changes that maybe coming down the pike in the near future related to teachers and leaders as well that could impact where we land on our goals. So I say that to say, remind us that we can certainly adjust these goals. We may decide that we want to make an adjustment if there is a shift in how we're talking about these pieces as a state as well. But what you have here, or really what we heard from stakeholders, was wanting to focus on teacher recruitment and teacher retention, and as well as leaders. So let me start with leaders first. Leaders is something that we just, as a state, do not have a lot of data on. And so there is not, in terms of recruitment and retention. So there is not a goal specific to leaders that you see before you right now. What there is within the actions, a intention to study, to research best practices around the country for recruitment and retention, so we can start to think about how we may establish stronger rules and policies to support that, as well as then setting a goal. But we are just not at a place to really set a goal around leaders at this moment, which is why you see that existing in the actions instead. In terms of the teacher goals, the first one is about educators who are remaining in the classroom for at least 5 years. And so what we see here is based on some conversations that we had with different stakeholders, really thinking, broadening out what we had previously, which was a 3-year retention goal, to 5 years, as that is the point where we start to see some shifts happening in terms of retaining teachers. And so using some of our data, Erica Light was able to help calculate this of an increase to 68% retention. Erica, can you remind me where we've been? I'm blanking on where we've been the last few years. Can you remind me what our data point was there?
Sure. So we saw over the last few years that the 5-year retention rate of newly licensed teachers who attended a Tennessee preparation program had decreased slightly from around 67% down to 66%. And so we were hoping, this is a kind of a difficult metric to measure because you have to look back several years in the past to find a group that has the potential to have been around for 5 years. But we're hoping that over the next 3 years that we can reverse that small decline that we saw and start moving in the other direction and have increased 5-year retention.
Thank you. So setting a 5-year retention goal is specifically a recommendation that we heard from TARA, the Tennessee, Education Research Alliance. Their team, that was their recommendation here specifically to broaden it out to that 5-year retention rate. But again, Mr. Eby and I know we chatted earlier this week and you had another suggestion. So would you like to mention that here too?
Sure. I think one of the biggest challenges we have is getting licensed teachers in the classroom. We have a shortage across the state. Now, if you look at data that TDOE presents, they don't show the shortages because they count teachers on permits and count teachers on waivers. And we also are working hard to make it easier to license teachers without impacting the quality. So it seems to me a goal might be to reduce or to increase the number of licensed teachers to effectively reduce the shortage of licensed teachers across the state. And, we got these to obtain a valid teacher's license. That's just getting numbers, but what does that mean? What does that mean within the areas that we have teacher needs? So is there a criteria or a goal that we can set? And maybe Chrissy's got some input into this. Maybe I'm way off base, Chrissy, but it just seems to me that's would be an important goal.
Not sure if we lost her for a moment.
No. Allie, you and I had that conversation. You want to input into that, or?
Yeah, so I think that is another option that we could consider here. And I was discussing this over with the policy and research team this week as well, in considering what we might shift this to. And so based on that suggestion of really thinking about vacancies, not only as just someone who's not like no one in the classroom, but someone who does not have a valid educator license to teach the subject that they are in the class in like for that specific classroom. And so as we were discussing it as a team, we were thinking about, okay, if we brought in vacancy to include anyone with an emergency credential, we're using data that way, we could consider having a vacancy goal that is based on educators who are not on an emergency credential or an open classroom vacancy definition, and then building in this second goal that's italicized currently, but we could move to decide to keep it, of saying of those people who are on a permit, one of those emergency credentials, we want to see similarly an increase in them moving to a valid and permanent license. So having two goals that work together to address that problem of recruitment and retention.
Right.
I'll just chime in if that's okay. I think that as long as we don't lose sight of the strategies behind each specific group of people, because they are different, I think that would work really well. So the strategy for someone who, and there are many districts who don't have true empty classrooms, but they do have quite a few, they may have quite a few people who are they did the work to recruit them. They've been teaching in the classroom, but they haven't enrolled in a preparation program, or they haven't taken their test. That strategy, for a district trying to support that educator is very different from a district that has a bunch of empty classrooms, because then we're talking about things like differentiated compensation, maybe more novel ways to recruit educators beyond some of the more traditional ways that they do that. So I think as long as we kind of are able to parse out what we're expecting to see from districts based on the type of educators that they're trying to get fully licensed, I think that could work well.
So I'd love to hear from the committee if we feel strongly about the two goals that are here, or changing the first goal to a goal specific to vacancy and keeping the second goal to pair those together. What are our thoughts on the goals here?
I like how we're being transparent with we don't have a lot of information for leaders, and that we're going to spend the next little while looking at practices of recruiting and retaining effective leaders. So that's good, instead of just making a goal. I like that. It's always good to have a goal to make sure there are licensed educators. And I'd like to dig in with Bob a little bit more about how they're not showing those vacancies, because they're talking about like job embedded and unlicensed teachers. So that's something we really need to dig into as well, because obviously we want teachers that have had the training and have passed the tests and all the things, more so than job embedded. But I know that we have that need, so we can't really get away from that totally. So
and I think if you go look at the state data on permits and waivers and see where those areas are, you'll see that where they show there's no shortage of teachers. But then when you look at the numbers that are actively teaching on waivers, to me that gives, that's a concern. So are they?
Absolutely.
Yeah. I just, again, going back to what Allie and I had talked about, it just seems to me that because I believe, and maybe it's not, but because I believe that there's keeping licensed teachers in the classroom is critical, there ought to be some kind of a goal that says we reduce the number of waivers and permits that we have and increase the number of licenses or something, whatever Allie was suggesting. Paired.
Now, I think the other proposal is to have the first goal be replaced with a goal that's centered around reducing
Right.
The percentage of vacancies of anyone inclusive of, an empty classroom as well as anyone on an emergency credential.
Right.
And then the second goal being the one that you see on the screen in terms of moving teachers who are on a permit to a permanent license.
I think that's good.
Say just one sort of thing to put a pin in, as the General Assembly historically has created more pathways to permits and new permits, that could have a negative impact on our progress toward meeting such a goal. So I think that puts us kind of in an interesting position if they continue to do that. Hopefully we're done doing that, because I don't think it's the right solution necessarily. The right solution, as you all have said, is to get folks on full and valid licenses that show that they have the knowledge and expertise to be in that
Can't you
classroom.
only teach on permits for like 3 years or something like that?
Yes, however, they've now created the limited license, which effectively allows somebody to be not fully prepared for 5 years in the classroom. And then they created the clinical practice permit, which allows somebody to get in the classroom as teacher of record before they get a bachelor's degree.
I mean, and this goal isn't saying we don't want anyone on a permit. We're just saying the ones that aren't permit, we don't want them to stay on a permit
Exactly.
longer than 3 years. I think that's good. And I think, I mean, just in the meetings I've been in, they understand that a licensed teacher is much better and much more prepared, but it's just the problem we're having. We've got to have a person in the building, in the classroom that's teaching. So we're just doing what we have to do to get there. So I think this is a great goal. That second one.
Any feedback, points of discussion related to any of the actions that are in the draft report?
Okay. Yeah. On the state board will actively participate and facilitate. Let's see. No, I'm not. I'm on the wrong one. I keep on going down. My computer keeps on moving down. I'm good. No, what? Yeah. Why does this keep on going down? Yeah, I'm good.
Sounds like we can move into our fourth and final focus area. This one related to engagement and accountability, much more focused internally on the state board than those other external focus areas that we just discussed. So again, you see the larger overarching goal followed by action statements and the annual goals that we're tracking for the next 3 years. So based on lots of feedback and suggestions here, where we landed with the goals is to expand upon the current one, which is represented in the second goal as one that we have in place already. We're adding to it a little bit, and then adding in an additional second goal, which is really the first one on the slide. Apologies for the order. But the new goal would be to add an engagement goal for our members of attending annually at least 2 external events, meetings, or activities directly related to the goals and actions of the master plan. So further emphasizing the importance of tying back to these focus areas and where we're focusing our efforts for the next 3 years, while setting an engagement goal for specific engagement goal for members, most of which I think, if nothing else, everyone is already achieving, but really calling attention to it. And I will share that the Tennessee Higher Education Commission, in reviewing this, they especially called this out, that they really liked setting this goal, specifically related to tying a number to engagement, and is something they're considering for their members as well. Any points of feedback, questions, comments on the goals here?
Is 2 the right number? And I know in saying that people have different amounts of time and capacity, but I also want to make sure that we have a number that we don't want to alienate people, but we also want to make it high enough that we think that, like any of our goals, that it's ambitious and it's pushing people to, strive to be as good as they can be.
We were
I think,
proposing to, oh, sorry, go ahead.
well, I'm glad to see the goal, but I think it depends on how you define external events. You know, if you define it like as a superintendent study council, an event, if that's true, then probably 2 is not, not enough. But if you define attending a TSBA event or, something like that, then yeah, I think two is fine. So, I don't think we got to get too prescriptive, but I do think we want to continue to encourage our board members to engage as much as they can. And this goal does that. I don't think I answered Mr. Ryan's comment, but that's my thoughts on it.
Ms. McIntyre, if you're on mute, if you're trying to talk with us.
There we go. Ryan, are you wanting to make that more than 2? Is that what you were asking?
I think so. I mean, as I read it, it seem pretty clear to me it would include superintendent study council meetings. At least as, those are meetings that relate to the goals of the state board.
How about 4 then, which would be 1 a quarter?
Yeah.
I think so. I mean, 2 is a minimum, I think. In order for it to be a goal, I agree.
I like 4.
Yeah.
I love it. And when we onboard new members, I'm going to say, and this was set by our board members. But no, I think based on the current engagement rates of our members, even our busiest members, of which many of you are, like, I think 4 is ambitious, but it seems like what people are currently achieving. So if you all don't think that's too much, I mean, I think it really speaks to the commitment of our board members.
And it's not you have to, I mean, it's a goal. So that's always that. I think 2 would be, okay, well, I've done my 2 and I can be done, but the goal would be 4.
Right. It's not like you're keeping off the board. But if you've done 3 and it's toward the end of the year, you're thinking, should I do 1 more or not? And the goal is 2, and you think, well, I've already exceeded it.
Yeah.
Maybe I need to do 1.
Yeah.
Well, and then if you reported it by total, 10 times 4 is 40, and maybe one board member only went to 3, but another one went to 6 or something, you say we attended 44 events. We met the average goal or something.
Mr. Chairman, from an external affairs perspective, I think 4 is great, and it's also pretty reasonable in terms of an expectation for a potential new board member to look at that and say, okay, got my board meetings and my special called meetings, and between a couple of days in the district, for the most part, I find that board members want to be out considerably more often. So I look back over the course of the last decade, and I think a lot of progress has been made there.
Well, it's the only way you can really effectively do your job is to be engaged in, in the schools and the activities. And so I think I agree. Now, Chrissy, you can't count every day you're in school as a day.
Yeah, that would really mess up the average. 180.
I would say as your lawyer that those are activities that directly relate to the goals and actions of the master
Thank
plan.
you, I appreciate that. So I'll always win.
Any other thoughts on the goals, or I can open it up to the actions too, points of feedback for discussion?
I'm looking at the actions. Do we have to be that specific about guidance for effectively leveraging AI? I just feel like all the other ones are more general, and then that one's very specific. And like, what are we talking about effectively leveraging AI with our student population, with our teacher population? There's just I don't know. I don't remember that one, and we may have already had that one in there the whole time, but it just caught my eye.
Yeah, that is new. We did try to write it a little more broadly, so it's funny that you feel it's specific. But yeah, I think, oops, I'm changing my slide now. Open to suggestions. There was a real interest, or continues to be an interest, not only among the board, but stakeholders of continuing to discuss AI. But we don't have a clear path forward. So we wanted to try to write something that acknowledged the importance of it and wanting to continue to think about state level resources and guidance while not getting too specific or prescriptive of what we would accomplish in 3 years, but certainly open to edit suggestions here. And Dr. Morrison, you've been spending a lot of time on this. If you want to add on, feel free.
I'm interested in people's feedback. I mean, I feel like every conversation I'm in, there is some mention or discussion of how AI is evolving and the impacts, good, bad, and otherwise, on education, and how we can try to better be proactive and wrangle the beast that is, and use it for really productive ways in our educational settings. But we have, as a staff, really kind of trying to figure out where is the best place for it to show up in our plan. Mr. Jensen, I know, has been thinking about this and pushing on it too, and others of you, I know Chairman Eby. So interested in people's thoughts there about how and where AI shows up in this plan, recognizing that it is a big conversation kind of ongoing in terms of the effects that we see in schools and how we should proactively as a board be thinking about AI.
I think you go ahead. I'm sorry.
It's okay. I'm just making sure we're not pushing for the use of more technology, more screen time, all the things that come with students, because we're starting to see more and more that it's not as beneficial having kids on screen so much. And when I see that, I'm thinking that would be us encouraging the use of even more technology and more screens. And we're seeing that our IQ is going down as a whole generationally. We're seeing that students are more like the mental side of that, and socially they're not as renowned as they were. Like, there's just a lot of issues that I'm starting to kind of see, and I'm reading more. And AI as a teacher tool is amazing. I mean, I just told my related arts teachers to plug in how they can teach their lower benchmark standards to, like, in an art class, but using AI as a way to just quickly be able to see different ways to do that. But I don't love pushing more and more technology if we're seeing more negatives than positives. But we do need to make sure that we're looking at AI regardless, just because it's here. But in which platform, teachers or more student, like ed tech type situation?
Yeah, I don't think we're saying that. I think what we're saying, exactly what you're saying, is first recognizing that AI is out there. You know, when we were at Jamestown and asked how many students asked the superintendent, or, you know, the state board policy or state policy is that every district will have an AI policy, and the Jamestown director said his policy was not to use it because he was scared to death of it from a prohibitive concepts, et cetera. And then you ask the students, and every one of the students said, yeah, they use AI. So, I mean, it's here. And I think what we need to do is, you know, as we're saying here, have guidance for effectively leveraging it, you know, for teachers or whatever, but recognizing the pros and the cons. The example that I gave in my podcast was, we heard from the AI director at Oak Ridge National Laboratory that says AI is like a fire. It can warm your heart, or it can warm your house, or it can burn it down, you know. And so without any policy or guidance, you know, who knows what's going to be done and how it's going to be done. And so I think that's why we're looking at it, is what kind of guidance can we give?
Okay. So other than that, yeah, I'm good with this slide.
I too.
Okay. Well, before we move into our next
Hold a
step,
second. Did we ask about the actions of the state board? I thought we were talking about, okay, I did have one comment there, and this is just a little nit, but in the words, we talk about efforts to revive state level systems that create incoherence. Seems like to me, instead of talking about creating incoherence, we ought to talk about how we can improve coherence or something like that. Just a nit, be more positive instead of negative. That's just a thought.
noted. Thank you. Okay, before we move into next steps and adjournment, I do just want to pause and see if there's any other points of feedback, discussion, questions related to any of the focus areas in the master plan draft. Okay, well, Chairman Holt, if that's okay with you, I can move us into our next steps.
Yes, please. Thank you.
So right now we have a plan to bring the updated master plan for full state board approval at the February board meeting. It does seem though that given the discussion today, we probably will want to send an updated draft back around to everyone. I don't think, unless you all would like to, we need to hold another meeting, but certainly leave that up to you all to decide. But what I would propose is that staff works on updating the draft, emails it back around for final review before it is before the full state board at the February board meeting.
I personally like that plan. I don't think another meeting is necessary unless the group believes it is, and perhaps we could wait and receive the revised master plan. And if folks decide then that they want to have a meeting, then we could call a meeting. But otherwise, if we can approve it on email, then or move to the next step via email, then we could do that.
For our committee members, Ms. McInturf and Mr. Jensen, does that sound like a good plan for you all too?
That's good for me.
Okay, perfect. All right, well, we will work on updating and sharing it back around via email. And then, Mr. Chair, I'll turn it back over to you.
Thank you, Ms. Reed. Appreciate all your leadership with the master plan. It's really in great shape. I know a lot of hard work and time and thoughtfulness has gone into that. So thank you for that. Are there any other questions or final comments before we adjourn from anyone? That concludes the work of this committee. With no further business of the committee, this meeting is adjourned.
Thank you.